I stood frozen for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds. That was how long my billionaire husband stared at my hand on his arm, before he leaned down and whispered something that shattered 8 years of marriage. Never touch me in public. The words hit harder than a slap. My fingers instantly loosened. The champagne glass nearly slipped from my hand. And around us, people kept laughing. The orchestra kept playing. The crystal chandeliers kept sparkling. No one noticed that my marriage had just died. Tell me honestly, if your husband said that to you in front of hundreds of people, would you stay? Because I did. At least for another 12 hours. And that was my biggest mistake. The charity gala was being held inside one of the most luxurious hotels in Manhattan. Every major business family was there. Politicians, investors, media executives, women in designer gowns, men worth hundreds of millions. And standing in the center of it all was my husband, Vincent Ashford, the man everyone admired, the man financial magazines called a genius, the man who spent 8 years convincing me I should be grateful simply to stand beside him. I watched him from across the ballroom. People surrounded him, laughing at every joke, listening to every word. Meanwhile, I stood alone near the wall, exactly where he preferred me, visible enough to complete the image, invisible enough not to distract from it. That had been my role for years. Smile. Nod. Look beautiful. Stay quiet. I used to think marriage was a partnership. Vincent taught me otherwise. To him, I was an accessory, a carefully selected piece of decoration. No different from the expensive art hanging in our mansion. The worst part? I didn't realize how much of myself I had lost until that night. The limousine ride there should have warned me. The entire 30-minute trip passed without Vincent looking at me once. Not once. His eyes stayed glued to his phone. His assistant called 3 times. He answered all 3. I sat beside him. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention my dress. Didn't even acknowledge my existence. When the car stopped, he stepped out first. As always. I followed several feet behind. As always. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. I just kept pretending not to see them. The emerald dress I wore that night was beautiful. I remember that. I remember spending nearly an hour getting ready, pinning my hair, choosing jewelry, trying to look like the woman I thought my husband wanted. And none of it mattered. Because when I finally touched his arm on that balcony, the expression on his face looked almost disgusted. Like I had embarrassed him. Like affection from his wife was something shameful. Something to hide. Never touch me in public. I kept hearing it. Again. And again. And again. The words followed me through every conversation afterward. The Harrisons introduced themselves. I smiled. Someone complimented my dress. I smiled. A woman asked how Vincent and I met. I smiled. Inside, something was breaking. Quietly. Completely. By the time we got home, I already knew. I just hadn't admitted it yet. The mansion was dark when we returned. 8 bedrooms. 12 bathrooms. 2 grand staircases. A house people envied. A house that had never once felt like home. Vincent walked straight toward his office. No good night. No conversation. No explanation. Nothing. The study door closed behind him. And suddenly the entire house felt silent. I stood in our bedroom still wearing my gown. Still wearing my wedding ring. Still pretending everything was fine. Then I looked into the mirror. And I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back looked exhausted. Not physically. Spiritually. Like someone who had spent years shrinking herself. Years apologizing for taking up space. Years trying to earn love that should never have required earning. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I started crying. Not because of what Vincent said. Because of what I finally understood. He wasn't going to change. And if I stayed, neither would I. At 3:47 in the morning, I pulled a suitcase from the closet. My hands stopped shaking. Something strange happened. The moment I decided to leave, I felt calm. For the first time in years. I packed clothes. A few books. Personal documents. Nothing expensive. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to start over. As sunrise painted the sky pink and gold, I grabbed a sheet of paper. I wrote one sentence. I am tired of being invisible. I am leaving. Then I folded it, placed it on the nightstand, removed my wedding ring, and left it beside the note. No speech. No screaming. No revenge. Just silence. The same silence Vincent had given me for 8 years. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. The taxi driver loaded my suitcase into the trunk. Where to? He asked. I looked back at the mansion, then looked away. Anywhere but here. The first few weeks were terrifying. I won't lie. Freedom sounds romantic until you realize freedom also comes with bills. Rent. Groceries. Uncertainty. I checked into a small hotel, then rented a tiny studio apartment. The entire apartment could probably fit inside one of Vincent's guest bedrooms. And somehow, it felt bigger, because it belonged to me. The first night there, I sat on the floor eating takeout noodles from a paper container. No servants. No luxury. No marble floors. No designer furniture. Just me. And for the first time in years, I could breathe. 5 months later, my life looked completely different. The apartment was still small, but now there were books everywhere. Plants on the windowsill. Photos of old friends I had reconnected with. Pieces of myself returning. One by one. Finding work wasn't easy. 8 years away from teaching had left huge gaps on my resume. I quit Friday night. Her mouth fell open. You quit Prescott Global? I nodded. For several seconds she simply stared at me. Then she said exactly what I needed to hear. Good. I actually laughed. That's not the response I expected. She squeezed my hand. Amelia, you've been miserable for years. I wasn't miserable. Iris raised one eyebrow. The same eyebrow our mother used whenever she caught us lying. Yes, you were. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because she was right. And for once, I was too tired to pretend otherwise. The ceremony started 20 minutes later. I stood beside Iris as she walked toward Caleb, and suddenly none of my problems mattered. Not the job. Not the uncertainty. Not Jameson. Nothing. Just this moment. This beautiful moment. When my sister found the happiness she'd spent years searching for. I cried through half the ceremony. So did Caleb. So did Iris. Even the officiant looked emotional. By the reception, everyone was laughing again. The speeches started. Then dancing. Then food. Then more dancing. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. Until my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. I ignored it. 2 minutes later. Another call. Then another. Then another. By the 5th call, curiosity won. I stepped outside. Hello. Miss Roberts. A male voice. Professional. Come. This is Nathan Lewis from Prescott Global Legal Affairs. My stomach dropped. Legal affairs? Seriously? Was Jameson actually trying to threaten me through lawyers? If this is about some employment contract. No. The man interrupted. Actually, Mr. Prescott requested I call because he refuses to stop calling you himself. I blinked. What? A pause. Then a sigh. Miss Roberts, he's driving everyone insane. I almost laughed. What does he want? He wants to know if you're okay. The silence stretched. I genuinely didn't know how to respond. Because somehow, that was the last thing I expected. He asked legal to call me? Yes. Why? Another pause. Between us. The lawyer lowered his voice. I've worked here 12 years. Yes. I've never seen him like this. Something twisted in my chest. Like what? Terrified. The word lingered. Terrified. Not angry. Not controlling. Not furious. Terrified. I ended the call 5 minutes later. Then stood alone beneath the evening lights. Thinking. Remembering. Questioning everything. Because for 5 years, Jameson had acted like I was replaceable. Now suddenly, he couldn't function without me? It didn't make sense. And yet, part of me wanted to believe it. That was the dangerous part. Back inside, Iris found me near the dessert table. You have that face. What face? The Jameson face. I groaned. Do not start. You still care about him? No. Liar. I grabbed a cupcake. She grabbed my wrist. Amelia. I looked at her. Really looked. And saw concern. Not judgment. Concern. He hurt you. I know. He doesn't deserve another chance. I know. Then why are you defending him? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I wasn't defending him. I was trying to understand him. And that scared me more than anything. By Monday morning, reality arrived. Rent. Utilities. Health insurance. Savings. Future. I sat at my kitchen table staring at spreadsheets. Ironically, even after quitting, my life still revolved around spreadsheets. I updated my resume, sent applications, reviewed job postings, and tried not to panic. Then at exactly 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. Again. This time I already knew. I answered. Amelia. His voice. Deep. Familiar. Dangerously familiar. I closed my eyes. Jameson. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he finally said it. Can we talk? And somehow, that simple question felt far more dangerous than any ultimatum he'd ever given me. Because this time, he wasn't ordering me. He was asking. And I wasn't sure which version of him scared me more. Can we talk? I stared out the apartment window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The city looked gray. Uncertain. A lot like my future. There's nothing left to say. That's not true. His voice sounded tired. Not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes when someone hasn't slept. Hasn't stopped thinking. Hasn't stopped regretting. I hated that I noticed. I hated that I cared. Amelia. There it was again. That tone. Not boss. Not CEO. Just Jameson. And somehow that made everything harder. What? Meet me once. No. 20 minutes. No. 10. I rolled my eyes. You're negotiating. It's what I do. Despite myself, I almost smiled. He caught it. I could hear it in his voice. Was that a laugh? No. It was definitely a laugh. I hung up. Immediately. Before he could hear the smile forming. Before I could admit how much I'd missed hearing his voice. The phone rang again. I rejected it. It rang again. Rejected. Again. Rejected. Finally a text appeared. One coffee. No pressure. No arguments. No ultimatums. I owe you that much. I stared at the message. Then another arrived. Please. That stupid word again. Please. The man who used to order entire executive teams around with a single look was suddenly begging me for coffee. I should have ignored him. Instead, I agreed. 3 words. Tomorrow. 1 coffee. The second I sent it, my stomach flipped. Because deep down I knew. This wasn't closure. Not really. The next day I arrived early. Mostly because I was nervous. The coffee shop sat 3 blocks from Prescott Global Headquarters. A place we'd both visited hundreds of times. Except usually I was carrying his coffee, not meeting him as an equal. When I walked inside, he was already there. Of course he was. Jameson was never late. For anything. The moment he saw me, he stood. Actually stood. For me. That alone nearly broke my brain. For 5 years he'd barely looked up from emails. Now he looked like he'd been counting every second until I arrived. You came. The relief in his voice sounded genuine. Dangerously genuine. I sat down. 30 minutes. His mouth twitched. Still negotiating. Don't push it. A waitress arrived. Without asking, she placed a coffee in front of me. Cream. 1 sugar. Exactly how I liked it. I stared at the cup. Then at Jameson. You remembered. Something softened in his expression. I remember everything. My pulse betrayed me. Traitor. I wrapped both hands around the cup. Trying to stay focused. Trying to remember every reason I should walk away. So talk. He nodded. Then surprised me. Immediately. I was wrong. No excuses. No explanations. No blame shifting. Just that. I was wrong. Silence stretched between us. Because somehow I hadn't prepared for 5 years wasted. 5 years trying to earn appreciation that should have been freely given. I kept waiting. His eyes lifted. For what? For one day. My voice cracked. One day where you would notice. The pain that crossed his face looked real. I noticed. Then why didn't you say anything? He looked down. For the first time since I'd met him, Jameson Prescott looked ashamed. And that was almost more shocking than the apology. You want the truth? Yes. I was afraid. I blinked. What? A bitter laugh escaped him. I know how ridiculous that sounds. Try me. He stared into his coffee, then finally spoke. Every important person in my life eventually left. The words came slowly, like they hurt. My father. Pause. My mother. Pause. Business partners. Another pause. So I built rules. I frowned. What kind of rules? Never need anyone. His smile looked painful. Never depend on anyone. Then his eyes found mine. Never love anyone. My heartbeat stumbled. Because suddenly things made sense. Not everything. But enough. Enough to see the man behind the armor. The man I'd spent years working beside. The man nobody else ever seemed to notice. I didn't push you away, because you weren't important. His voice dropped. I pushed you away because you were. The words landed directly in my chest. And I hated how much they affected me. Jameson. When you walked out. He interrupted softly. Everything stopped. I swallowed. He continued. The office stopped working. A small smile touched my lips. That's dramatic. No. His gaze never left mine. That's the truth. Then he leaned forward. And everything changed. Amelia. My breath caught. You are the first person I've ever trusted. The coffee shop disappeared. The noise. The conversations. The music. Everything faded. Leaving only those words. And the man sitting across from me. A man I thought I knew. A man who suddenly felt like a stranger. A stranger I wanted to understand. Which was probably the most dangerous thing of all. Because at that exact moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't over him. Not even close. And for the first time since walking away, that possibility scared me more than unemployment ever could. I wasn't over him. Not even close. And judging by the look in his eyes, neither was he. The realization sat between us. Heavy. Dangerous. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I pushed my chair back. I need time. Jameson nodded immediately. No argument. No pressure. No manipulation. Just acceptance. Take all the time you need. That surprised me more than anything else. The old Jameson would have pushed. Demanded. Controlled. This version simply let me go. Again. And somehow that hurt. Because it proved he really was changing. The next 2 weeks were torture. Not because of Jameson. Because of myself. Every interview felt wrong. Every company felt wrong. Every office felt wrong. I kept comparing everything to Prescott Global. The pace. The people. The challenges. The excitement. The truth was embarrassing. I loved the work. I always had. I just hated the way I'd been treated. Then the offers started arriving. 3 companies. For interviews. 2 executive assistant positions. 1 operations manager role. All respectable. All safe. None of them felt right. Then my phone rang again. This time it wasn't Jameson. It was Olivia. The CFO of Prescott Global. Amelia. Her voice sounded exhausted. We need help. I frowned. What happened? Silence. Then. Everything. My stomach tightened. Start talking. The Tanaka contract. Iset opreiz. What about it? It collapsed. My pulse jumped. The Tanaka deal was worth over $200 million. One of the biggest contracts in company history. How? No one knows. She sighed. The proposal contained major errors. I froze. Errors? Impossible. I personally reviewed every version before leaving. Unless. A thought hit me. Hard. Who finished it after I left? Another pause. Then. 3 different teams. There it was. The problem. Too many people. No central control. No coordinación. Exactly the chaos I'd spent 5 years preventing. How bad is it? Bad. I could hear papers moving. Voices in the background. Stress. Panic. The client suspended negotiations. I closed my eyes. Because I knew exactly what that meant. Stock volatility. Investor pressure. Board scrutiny. And Jameson standing at the center of it. Alone. The same way I'd left him. Has Jameson called you? Olivia asked carefully. No. A lie. Good. I blinked. What? You shouldn't make this easy for him. Interesting. Very interesting. Why? Olivia laughed. A tired laugh. Because watching him suffer is the most entertaining thing that's happened in years. I nearly choked. What? Amelia. Her voice lowered. You have no idea what you've done to that man. I didn't like how my heart reacted. What are you talking about? He hasn't slept. Silence. He hasn't eaten properly. More silence. He spends half his day staring at your empty office. I looked away, suddenly unable to breathe normally. That sounds dramatic. No. Olivia's answer came instantly. What's dramatic is that he canceled 3 international trips because he thought you might call. My pulse accelerated. Fast. Dangerously fast. Because this wasn't Jameson Prescott. Not the man I knew. Not the man who treated billion-dollar deals as routine. Not the man who terrified investors. This sounded like someone falling apart. And I didn't know what to do with that information. The call ended 10 minutes later. But Olivia's words stayed. All day. All night. The next morning, I tried to ignore them. Then I made the mistake of checking the news. Prescott Global stock had dropped 7%. Investors were nervous. The Tanaka contract rumors were spreading. Business analysts were questioning leadership. And suddenly, I wasn't just worried about Jameson. I was worried about hundreds of employees. Thousands of families. People whose lives depended on that company succeeding. I hated that I cared. I really did. But I cared anyway. 3 days later, another call came. This time from Jameson. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hello. The relief in his exhale was immediate. Thank God. I rolled my eyes. You're impossible. Probably. A pause. Then. I need your help. My heart stopped. Not because of the words. Because Jameson Prescott never asked for help. Ever. What happened? The Sydney expansion. Immediately I sat up. That project had been mine. Every contract. Every invoice. Every approval. What about it? Another pause. Longer this time. Then he said 4 words that changed everything. Someone is sabotaging us. I went completely still. Because suddenly this wasn't about feelings anymore. It wasn't about attraction. Or regret. Or second chances. This was war. And whoever was behind it had just made a very expensive mistake. Because there was one thing everyone always underestimated about me. They thought I was the assistant. The organizer. The woman behind the scenes. The quiet one. The helpful one. What they never realized was that I knew where every body was buried. Every file. Every password. Every contract. Every secret. And if someone had touched my project, I was about to find them. No matter who they were. No matter what it cost. And 5 days later, when I finally discovered the truth, even Jameson looked shocked. 5 days later, I found it. And the moment I did, everything changed. I was sitting inside a temporary conference room at Prescott Global. Back in the building I swore I'd never enter again. Stacks of documents covered the table. 3 laptops. 7 binders. Hundreds of invoices. And one increasingly frustrated billionaire. Jameson looked terrible. Not physically. Emotionally. His normally perfect suit was wrinkled. His tie was gone. Dark circles sat beneath his eyes. The man looked like he'd aged 5 years and 5 days. Good. Part of me thought he deserved it. Another part hated seeing him like that. Anything. He asked for the 20th time. No. I didn't look up. Then stop asking. His jaw tightened. You always get grumpy when you're close to solving something. I paused. Slowly looked up. How do you know that? A tiny smile appeared. The first one I'd seen in days. Because I've watched you work for 5 years. My stomach betrayed me. Again. Traitor. I immediately returned to the files. Trying to ignore him. Trying to ignore the warmth spreading through my chest. Trying to ignore the fact that we'd spent nearly 70 hours together this week. Most of them alone. Which was becoming a serious problem. Because the more time I spent with this new version of Jameson, the harder it became to hate the old one. Then I saw it. One invoice. Tiny discrepancy. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just a number. A very specific number. My pulse jumped. Wait. Jameson instantly straightened. What? I pointed. This invoice. He frowned. What about it? The formatting. He blinked. Formatting. Yes. I zoomed in. Then turned the screen toward him. Look. Several seconds passed. Then. I don't see it. Of course he didn't. Normal people wouldn't. But I'd spent years managing millions of documents. My brain noticed patterns. Tiny ones. Invisible ones. This font wasn't used by our accounting department. Silence. Jameson leaned closer. Are you sure? Very. How sure? I looked him dead in the eyes. 99.9%. That got his attention. Fast. I opened another file. Then another. Then another. Comparing. Cross-referencing. Checking metadata. And suddenly the puzzle started assembling itself. One piece. Then another. Then another. Until finally. Oh my God. Jameson froze. What? I looked up. Shock flooding through me. It wasn't accounting. His expression darkened. What do you mean? I turned the laptop around. Somebody altered these files. The room went silent. Completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. Altered. Yes. I pulled up timestamps. Access records. File histories. Evidence. Lots of evidence. And all of it pointed to one person. One very specific person. One person neither of us wanted to believe. Trevor. Jameson's voice sounded murderous. I nodded slowly. Trevor. For several seconds nobody spoke. Because suddenly everything made sense. The anonymous accusations. The audit demand. The investor panic. The contract issues. The timing. Everything. Every single thing. Trevor had created the crisis. Then sat back and watched it burn. Why? Jameson whispered. I already knew. The answer was obvious. Me. His eyes snapped toward me. He did it because of me. The realization hit hard. Harder than I expected. Because I liked Trevor. Not romantically. But professionally. He seemed kind. Smart. Normal. Apparently I was wrong. Jameson's jaw flexed. The anger radiating from him felt dangerous. He tried to destroy the company. I nodded. Yes. He tried to destroy my life. Yes. His gaze locked onto mine. And he used you to do it. That one hurt. Because it was true. Trevor asked for access through me. Trusted because of me. Given opportunity because of me. A knot formed in my stomach. This is my fault. No. Jameson's answer came instantly. I looked away. It is. No. Stronger this time. Sharper. He stood. Walked around the table. And suddenly he was standing directly in front of me. Close. Too close. My heart immediately lost all common sense. Look at me. I didn't want to. He waited. Patiently. Eventually I looked up. Big mistake. Because the way he was looking at me should have been illegal. None of this is your fault. His voice softened. You trusted someone. That was stupid. No. His hand brushed mine. Barely. But electricity exploded through me anyway. That was human. The room felt smaller. Warmer. Dangerous. Jameson. No. He took another step. close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The worry, the fear, the love. And that last one terrified me. Because it was real. Completely real. Do you know what the worst part of this week was? I swallowed. What? His laugh sounded hollow. For 5 days I thought I lost everything. The company. The contracts. The reputation. The future. Everything. Then his gaze dropped to my hand. And slowly returned to my eyes. Then I realized none of that scared me. My heartbeat accelerated. Fast. Too fast. Jameson. The thing that scared me. His voice cracked. Actually cracked. I thought I'd lost you. Silence. Pure silence. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't move. Because this wasn't manipulation. Wasn't charm. Wasn't strategy. It was truth. Raw truth. And truth is a dangerous thing. Especially when you've spent years wanting to hear it. He stepped closer. One final step. No space left between us. Amelia. The way he said my name made my knees weak. I love you. There it was. No hesitation. No fear. No games. Just love. Honest. Simple. Terrifying. And the worst part? I loved him too. I had for a long time. Longer than I wanted to admit. Longer than I could explain. Maybe from the beginning. Maybe from somewhere in the middle. Maybe from the moment I realized I saw parts of him nobody else did. I don't know. What I did know was that I was done running. Done pretending. Done hiding behind logic. So I stood. Grabbed his tie. Pulled him down. And kissed him. Hard. All the frustration. All the anger. All the months apart. All the sleepless nights. Everything exploded at once. His arms wrapped around my waist instantly. Like he'd been waiting years. Maybe he had. The kiss deepened. Dangerous. Desperate. Necessary. And when we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing like we'd run a marathon, Jameson rested his forehead against mine. A slow smile appeared. The kind I'd never seen before. The kind that belonged to a man completely in love. And that's when I made a decision. Not about the company. Not about Trevor. Not about my career. About us. Because after everything we'd survived, I wasn't walking away again. And 3 months later, in front of the entire board of directors, Jameson Prescott shocked everyone by making an announcement nobody saw coming. 8 months later, the company gala was in full swing. The Prescott Global Ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and hundreds of the city's most influential business leaders. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. Everyone was talking about the mysterious engagement announcement. And there we were. Jameson Prescott and me, Amelia Roberts, standing side by side. 8 months ago, I had walked away. 5 years of stress, manipulation, and emotional exhaustion had culminated in one terrifying elevator ride. I had chosen myself that night. And now here I was, no longer just an assistant. No longer invisible. I wore a deep sapphire gown fitted perfectly. Hair pinned with subtle elegance. Jewelry simple but sparkling under the lights. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Some admiring. Some envious. Some quietly judging. And at the center of it all was Jameson. Tall. Commanding. Powerful. But beside him now, the power balance had shifted. He looked at me, really looked at me, like I was the person he'd finally realized mattered the most. The board members, investors, even the press. Everyone had assumed this was another flashy announcement for PR. But they didn't know the truth. This engagement wasn't about optics. It was about respect. Partnership. Hard-earned love. When Jameson took my hand, the crowd hushed. I want everyone to see, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Not because we have to, but because I want them to know I've learned what it means to value someone fully. I squeezed his hand. And in that instant, I remembered every late night, every impossible deadline, every insult carefully hidden behind professionalism. All of it had led to this moment. I leaned slightly toward him and whispered, I never thought this day would come. He smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. Neither did I. But here we are. The photographer snapped pictures. Flashes illuminated the room. I could see expressions everywhere. Shock, jealousy, respect, admiration. Jameson bent down slightly, a private smile shared just between us. 8 months, Amelia, he said. 8 months since you walked out. 8 months of realizing I can't imagine a day without you. I felt my chest tighten. Yes, I whispered back. And I can't imagine going back. Because we had both changed. I had fought for my dignity, my life, my freedom. And he had fought to understand love beyond control and power. When he knelt, right there in the middle of the gala, I knew the cameras would capture it. I knew the headlines. But none of it mattered. Because this moment was ours. The diamond ring sparkled under the lights. The crowd gasped. I took a deep breath. And said the word that sealed everything. Yes. The applause erupted. Journalists captured every second. Board members looked on stunned. But I didn't hear any of it. I only felt his hands on mine. His eyes locking with mine. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was. Amelia Roberts. Seen. Valued. Respected. Loved. And as Jameson lifted me in a private spin beneath the chandeliers, I realized the story wasn't about walking away from a boss. It was about walking toward myself. Because the greatest victories aren't always in contracts or promotions. Sometimes they're in claiming your own worth. And once you do that, everything else falls into place. We stood there together, partners in life, in love, in business. The past was behind us. The future was ours. And nothing, no betrayal, no manipulation, no threat, could make me